Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on Perfecting the Pitch, series part 2, titled Defining Your Problem. The aim of this series is to really help support entrepreneurs coming out of the scientific and academic communities to be able to understand how to translate their idea and innovation into the marketplace. Today's event is co-sponsored by Africa Bio and BioAfrica Convention and here Emory, which is a program based at Emory University here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. So AHIA's mission is to advance health innovation and technologies in Africa through a bi-directional corridor between US-based resources and advisory and Africa-based early science innovators and strategic partners. And as a quick reminder, this is a 3-part series that aims to introduce entrepreneurial scientists and innovators to basic business concepts that is needed to drive the pitch, to bring their ideas to the marketplace, and also to potential investors. The first of this series was held on the 31st of May and was titled How to Craft a Successful Pitch. And if you were unable to join us for that session, we will be sending an email to all participants to have access to the YouTube channel or YouTube video that talks about that session. And on the 26th of July, we have another session which is titled Creating Your Business Strategy. And here we'll provide guidance on how to put all the business mechanisms in place around your innovation in order to make it successful. Today's session will be divided into 3 different parts. Part 1 will be a lecture on defining the problem your innovation aims to address and the techniques on how to effectively do this to secure the buy-in of potential investors. This lecture will be delivered by Professor Charlie Goetz. Then we will proceed to an innovator case study featuring Dr. Genevieve Thompson of Gene Vantage, an organization based in South Africa. Following this, we will have 10 minutes of question and answer. And please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box while the presentation is ongoing, and our presenters will do well to address these questions upon the completion of their presentation. So before we get started, I would like to provide a very brief introduction of 2 of our esteemed speakers today. Professor Charlie is one of the co-founders of AHIA Emory and is a professor at the Goetz Business School here at Emory University, Atlanta. Prior to his foray into academia, he had over 15 years of experience in developing, implementing, and growing entrepreneurial ventures. And he has been responsible for starting and building 9 new business ventures to date and delivered returns to investors. And in many cases, he exceeded initial investment expectations. These companies operated in 6 unique areas, including the banking sector, the healthcare sector, sports, fast food, and radio broadcasting. Professor Goetz teaches entrepreneurship to MBA and business undergrads here at Emory University, and he has written 3 books, the first of which is titled The Great Entrepreneurial Divide. His second book is titled So You Want to Start a Business, 8 Steps to Take Before Making the Leap. And his third book, which is a very interesting one, is a novel, which is a political thriller, and is titled Angels of Conspiracy. Genevieve Thompson is a health specialist who is equally passionate about driving healthcare innovation in Africa. She's the founder and CEO of Gene Vantage, which is a specialist organization in the field of nucleic acid extraction, and they are the only manufacturers of such products in Africa. They specialize in high molecular technologies and spent the bulk of 2020 through 2022 supporting various diagnostic labs with scaling up their workflows to meet the COVID-19 testing demands. And Genevieve has over 15 years of scientific research and molecular biology and laboratory experience. She has published in both popular academic and normal literatures, and she's involved in several activities, including postgraduate student mentorship of postdoctoral students and PhD students as part of her role in Gene Vantage. So that being said, I'm going to pass the baton over to Professor Charlie to get us started with the lecture. on defining your problem. Thank you. We can't hear you, Charlie.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Last time we were together, we were giving an overview of the investor presentation. Today, we're going to focus, excuse me, on the most important two slides of the investor presentation. The problem slide, and when I say slide, it might be one or two slides, and the solution slide or slides. So we're going to focus on that today. So we're going to start off with the problem. And when we talk about the problem, we're going to start off with a famous quote by Albert Einstein, who said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes analyzing the problem and only 5 minutes solving the problem. And this just goes to show how much time we need to be thinking about the problem itself. And oftentimes when we make our investor presentations, the problem is not well analyzed. It's not reviewed to the level it needs to be. And investors themselves are not excited about the business. So many companies, yes.
Yeah, you need to switch screens, I think. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not going to switch screens.
You're on the old presentation. You just need to go into the presentation.
Yeah, I apologize. There we go. That should do it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. All right. So many companies don't get investors to invest. And the reason they don't, even though they think they did a great presentation, is that they haven't defined their problem sufficiently. They go over it quickly, or they try to talk about different things, but the investor doesn't know specifically what the problem is. Maybe it's not, the details are not provided enough. Also, they've got to be succinctly. If it takes you too long to explain the problem, then they're not convinced you really understand the problem. And the last part is demonstrate that obviously that the problem itself is important to the market that we are serving. Tips on making the problem or slide more appealing to investors. We want to bring the problem alive so that the target market that we're addressing really, so that we understand the pain that they're experiencing. The next thing is, we don't want to gloss over this problem. We want to spend time on it. We want to use real life examples of real people, use their names in it if you want, maybe their pictures, and where possible, provide real data. And we'll talk about that. By providing real examples, it makes it more digestible and relatable to the investor. I talked about the concept of providing real data and facts. Data and facts gives it credibility. And you need credibility because right in the beginning, you don't have a lot of credibility. So anytime you can get information that you can put a footnote to of some source that people know, you're going to gain the benefit of that credibility. So the data itself must be focused on demonstrating that the problem is severe. And yes, the word severe is really important. It's not a little problem. It's a big problem. And there's a lot of people who are having this problem. In short, okay, you want to use short, powerful writing. And the way we do that is we stay away from paragraphs. Investors don't like to read. Most people don't like to read anymore. What we want to do is just give them the very simple bullet points, graphs, and charts, because they are going to understand more quicker than if they had to read the actual information. Your problem must be very clear and quantifiable. And this means there's got to be some numbers behind it. You can't just say, yes, people feel like they're not happy. Well, that's not really enough to get anybody to invest. You got to give us numbers. What percent are not happy? Why are they not happy? So we need to understand that in numbers. Here's an example of a company that used this process for their problem. Uber said when they first went out to investors, US passengers spend $75 billion per year to ride taxis that are unclean, hard to find, and unfair pricing. And this made it clear to investors exactly how they were going to solve this problem by addressing each of these three items. As far as defining the problem itself, okay? Proper definition. How you look at a problem really is the difference between maybe being successful and being truly very successful. And we're going to talk about how to look at it differently. Frequently, we don't ask the right questions. Questions are the most critical elements in understanding a problem. It's often the key to our successful outcome. So I'm going to show you an example here. Edward Jenner was the gentleman who created the smallpox vaccine. Prior to that, smallpox was a really bad disease. Lots of people were dying, and lots of scientists were trying to figure out a solution. But they were all asking the same question. Why do people get smallpox? In reality, okay, Jenner looked at it differently. He said, you know what? Everybody's getting smallpox, but there's a group of people called milkmaids. Those who milk cows weren't getting it. So he focused on the milkmaids and realized that the milkmaids had picked up cowpox, which is a similar disease to smallpox, and protected them. The shots you get for smallpox are actually cowpox. Instead of asking how I can recreate the Italian espresso bar, as Howard Schultz did when he was creating Starbucks, he looked at it differently and he said to himself, how can I create a comfortable, relaxing environment to enjoy coffee? Thousands of locations later, obviously it was a success because he asked the right question. Make sure you begin your creativity process, the whole process of defining the problem correctly. If you really want to come up with new answers and new ways of looking at it, your investors are expecting you to do that. So we want you to be thinking that way too. So now let's look at steps for defining the problem itself. In defining the problem, we want to be clear and succinct as possible, but I want us to be thinking about it this way. The first question is what? What is the situation today? And how is that going to differ when you solve it? So what can you do? What is the problem? How does it manifest today? And how will it be when you solve it? Why is it an important enough problem? Why is this the problem you picked? Isn't there other problems that are also important? What makes this problem worthy of us focusing on it? Who is specifically impacted by the problem? And you can't just say, you know, everybody is impacted by it, because they're not all equally impacted by it. Who is your target market? Who's the group of people that are really you're going to focus your solution on? Next one is how. How long has this problem been around? Now, the truth of the matter is, the longer a problem is around, except for healthcare related, the less likely people are looking for solutions. They get used to living with the problem. When does this problem happen? Is it happening all the time, or does something else have to happen in relationship to it in order for this problem to arise, so that we are focused on making sure that the problem we really are addressing is the right one? And where does the problem take place? Does it take place at home? Does it take place at work? Does it take place anywhere else in the world? So we know where to find this problem and where to address the people who are dealing with it. So let's come up with this problem statement. And the problem statement is an element that is so important to beginning the presentation, your investor presentation. The reason you need a good problem statement is it's the first thing that your investors are going to see that says whether they should really pay close attention or not. So I want to give you an example of what I think is a good problem statement. A good problem statement has certain attributes. It tells a good story. It grabs investors' attention. And hopefully, if it's really good, it excites them. Because when they're excited, they want to learn more and more likely to invest. So here's my example. Eating in a restaurant is a typical activity, but for Joey Smith, age 9, it almost cost him his life. Within seconds of entering the restaurant, he experiences constrictions of the airways and loss of consciousness. Joey, along with 80 million others in the world, have a severe peanut allergy, and today's treatments are a Band-Aid at best. That is until now. If we look at the specifics, okay, now we look at the problem and we say it again, let's analyze the statement. We're going to see first, it's a good story. It goes along with what, as far as Joey, it becomes a person who we kind of relate to. He's only 9 years old. And the problem, the pain is life. He could die from this problem. So the investors go, wow, this is an important problem. We talk about his actual symptoms. He experienced constriction of the airways and loss of consciousness. And then we talk about in this, how big the market is. In this case, we have 80 million people worldwide who have a severe peanut allergy. In the last statement, we see today treatments are a Band-Aid at best, which means that nobody's really solving the problem well. There's no competitors out there that are solving this problem. And then we say until now, and that's where we enter, obviously, with our solution. That's going to get a lot of investors excited. It told them a lot about the problem. It told them also about the size of the market. As far as problem slides are all problem slides are all about prospect needs and wants. When we talk about needs and wants, we really need to always be thinking about a need is an answer, a want is an answer. What's behind those needs and wants? And what it really comes down to is we want to understand the level of pain in the case of needs and the level of desires. How high of a priority is it to these people, whether it's a pain or a desire? So I'll ask a basic question to you. Which is more important in building your product, a need or a want? Now, most people will raise their hand and they'll say, I would rather solve a need than a want. And I'm going to tell you that that's really not important. What's really the most important is something I came up with called priority. And that concept of priority basically says that people who have high priorities for a solution are much more actively likely to try to solve that problem than people who have a medium priority or a low priority. If you think about it, how many high priorities at any time can somebody have? 2, 3, maybe 4. So those people, those are the highest things they're focused on. As you move down into the medium priority solutions and the low priority solutions, the amount of money you need to invest goes up dramatically in order to be able to offset that you don't have a high priority. The key takeaways here is finding out what prospects really want and why are the most important things you can do. Why do they really want this? To increase the probability of success in getting funded. Another way to look at this is high priority problems, too many P's, are what garner the most interest from investors. The investors are looking for these high priority problems. So you need to determine, do you have one? And the reason they love high priority problems is, yes, your probability of success is going to be greater. And one of the reasons is that the higher the probability, the high priority, the less price sensitive they are. If they're less price sensitive, they make decisions quicker, and you could also get a higher margin, which is important in building the business itself. As far as, okay, now we have an idea of the problem, but now we got to do some research. We need to find out, what does the market tell us about this problem? What are they thinking? And how are we going to get that information? So in order to get the data that we need, we're going to look at 2 different ways of doing it. Since data and facts are key in getting investors excited about our business and investing in it, we're going to look at 2 types of data. There's primarily primary data and there's secondary data. And these are 2 sources of data that we are going to need to be using within our problem statement. The first one we mentioned is the secondary data. This is the least expensive data because it's already created. It's out there in the market. If you belong to an association for the industry you're in, you can get, for relatively inexpensively, you can get data and analysis that they've done year over year about what's going on in the industry. Anytime you can use secondary data and you can use it to put into your presentation and put a good footnote, and if that data you're using is considered from a good source, you are going to benefit from the credibility of that source. So secondary data is really good. It's an overview information, but it gives us credibility in the marketplace. Examples of ways we can find this secondary information. I already mentioned industry associations. Pretty much every big industry in the world has an association. This is an ability for members of that industry to belong to gather information, to each of them pay a little bit so they can get a lot of good data and information. The next place is databases at libraries. Lots of business libraries, school libraries, will have databases which you can use and can also provide real valuable information. And also industry experts, they can provide information. The other way, the other source of information we're going to look at is primary information. This is information you generate. And the nice thing about it is it's very customizable. You decide on the questions you want to ask. You decide on who to ask. The negative is it's more time consuming and more expensive, but it also provides you with much greater detail. So you need to combine both the positives of the primary and the secondary data sources. When you use primary information, you need to talk to at least 50 to 100 of your potential prospects before you can make a decision of what they're really thinking. To do this effectively, when you're asking them questions, we want you to focus on the why question. Yes, you're going to ask a lot of questions, but when you start to see that people are showing signs that they're interested or they have a problem, you need to ask the question why to them. And when you start asking the question why 2, 3, 4, or 5 times, they start thinking more deeply and they start coming up with better reasons. And the key for us is not just discovering the problem, but discovering the reasons behind those problems. What causes this problem? Why is this problem existing? That's when we really have made the investors excited, when they start to see these causes or reasons behind these problems. Remember, you're trying to identify the things that others haven't already discovered. Your competitors are not doing what you have found to be important, and the reasons for what's causing their pain. This is what investors, as I mentioned, just love to see. When they see the reasons behind the problem, that's when they get excited. When targeting and talking to your target market with questions, you should always be looking at them for emotional responses. And these emotional responses aren't going to be big. They're not going to start crying or screaming, but they're going to do things like their voice might change. They're going to lean in towards you or away from you, or their facial expressions could change. These are giveaways that you're actually hit on something important. When you find out that they have one of these emotional responses, this is the time you need to probe deeper, because that's where you're going to find the solutions that are really valuable. If you don't understand the real reasons behind their needs, you risk creating a sub-satisfactory solution. So we want to get into really talking about the causes and the reasons behind it. Once we know what the problem is, we want to talk about the value. No solution is valuable unless it delivers value itself. So does your solution deliver value? Okay. And the way we want to do that, and I apologize for running a little out of time, so I'm going to go a little quicker. Does the value offer tie to the highest priority? Is it the most important thing they care about or not? You want a value must be determined by your customer's perspective, not yours. It doesn't. We don't care about your perspective. We only care about the customers. And does your product deliver more value than your competitors do? And why does it? And how much more value? How easy is your solution to learn or use? If it's hard to use or it's hard to learn, guess what? People are not going to use it. There are many ways to deliver value, and this is important. Everybody says, well, we give great value. But here's an interesting story, a different way of looking, that perception really impacts value. 10 years ago, engineers were given the task of making the journey from London to Paris better. So, like engineers do, they designed a very good engineering solution. And for 6.4 million pounds, or at the time, $9 billion, they were able to change the tracks and reduce the travel time it took for the trip by 18%. And we could say, well, 18% quicker, that's good value. But the question isn't whether that was good value, was it the best value? Okay, and the way to look at the best value is to look at other examples we could have provided to increase value. For only 5% of the cost they spent, we could have added Wi-Fi to the trains and the riders would have felt the trip was more enjoyable. So to a lot of riders, that might have been more valuable. For 35% of the original cost, we could have hired super models of both sexes and have them walk up and down the train serving free champagne. And that would have saved 4 billion pounds. And who knows, maybe the travelers would have been asking the engineers to the train to actually slow down instead. As far as the solution, we want the questions your solution needs to answer. Number one, how effective are you at solving the highest priority problems? Are you solving the most important ones? How do we know that? Is your solution so good that customers will do everything they can to get it? How do you know that? How can you prove that? Because if you can show that, your investors are going to be writing checks as fast as they can. How will your customers' lives change after they use the solution? What's going to be different? How are we going to know it was successful? Is your solution something they can't wait to tell others? And this is important because marketing is very expensive. Nothing is as good as word of mouth. If your customers are telling others to use it, you're going to have a much higher margin and a much more successful business with more customers. How much value does it actually deliver to your customers? And this is important. Your product may provide more value than what's already out there. But the research shows something very interesting. Unless your product or solution provides at least double the amount of value than what's already out there, most people don't change. See, making people change is a very difficult process. It requires not just a little bit more, but a lot more benefit. Does your solution or slide gel with what investors already think? So what you're giving them is a solution. Does it feel like correctly? Does that make sense to the investor? Or is it too out there? Is it too overly aggressive? Is it simple to understand? Is it simple to implement your solution? Or is it going to be difficult? Or maybe it's going to be more expensive than we think, than maybe investors think, than maybe you think. Does your solution have the ability to easily scale? And this is where investors really get excited. It's one thing to get the business going. What most investors are most interested in is, can you grow the business quickly? And that scalability becomes a critical element in how an investor looks at whether to invest or not. If they think it's easy to scale, meaning it's easy to get lots of people to use it once you prove it, then they're going to be much more likely to invest in the business. Is the solution capable of being protected against competitors? What this basically means is, does it have a patent? Do you have a patent pending or a patent on it? Do you have some unique technologies that nobody else can have access to? Do you have unique expertise that makes it happen? Maybe you have great connections, but what is it that's giving you your competitive advantage over your competitors and that you can protect your product for? Is the value significantly greater than the cost and time required of the customer to purchase it? And this is important because if it's not significantly greater than the effort that they have to put in to buy it, then they're not likely to buy it. So let's look at a good solution slide, an example of a good solution slide. And I'm going to take you back to what we were talking about a little earlier with Joey and the peanut allergy example. So we at XYZ, and this is the company now that is solving Joey's problem, we at XYZ are pleased to present the Peanut Shield, a new solution for people like Joey Smith. And everyone else with peanut allergies. Peanut Shield has been proven to totally eliminate all allergy symptoms for over 98.7% of all peanut allergy sufferers. You say something like this to the investors, they're going to get very excited. They can understand what the market is, how you solve the problem you identified earlier, and how now it's solving it in such a greater way that it sounds really good. They still have questions, of course. Think about the questions you would have at this point if you were about to write a check. It's good that it solves 98.7%, but there are other things they want to hear. And this is how we would show an example solution slide. So the benefits or the solutions, okay, for the product are, first, it saves lives. There's nothing more valuable than saving lives, obviously, but saving lives is one of the benefits. It enables sufferers to live a normal life. They don't have to do anything different. They don't have to live differently like they do now. Kids can, now go into the dining areas where other kids are eating. It makes it much more enjoyable life for them. It's easy to use. It's 24 hours a day. It works 24 hours a day, okay? And it gives a full day of protection. It's a patch that lasts on your arm for 30 days. It costs less than $1 a day. It's FDA and EMA approved, which means the US and the European governments have already approved that this does work. There's no prescription required, which means you can pick this up at your normal pharmacy or supermarket. It's patent pending, which means we now are protecting it. The investors will like that too. And it has a large gross margin, which means that the price will minus its cost still generates 88%, okay, left over to pay expenses of the business and to generate profitability. So if we look at each of these benefits, each one of them provides another reason for the investor to say, yes, this is a good investment for me, because I am answered. And a lot of times investors have questions. And what we're doing by providing these 9 different circles, if you will, is we're providing it in a simple way that is attractive, but is easy to digest by the investors, which becomes very important in them being able to understand something quicker and more likely to invest. I know I went through it a little quickly and I apologize, but we have such a wonderful presentation from Genevieve. So with that, I'd like to send it off to Genevieve. Genevieve, you ready?
Yeah. Go ahead, Moses.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Charlie, for such a wonderful insight into how to define the problem we aim to address as health innovators, particularly the questions that we have to answer ourselves on what the problem is, how we want to go about addressing these problems, why it's important, and ultimately who's going to benefit from our potential solutions. And Dr. Genevieve, we are excited to have you next to share with us how you identified the problem and solved that problem very effectively. And I'll pass the baton over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. And thank you, Charlie. As always, you didn't disappoint. I just want to take a minute to give a little shout out to Charlie. The first time I experienced him was last year, August, at the BioAfrica conference. And he dialed into the meeting and the audience was enormous. I think there were about 150 students sitting in the room. And I just thought, oh, it's going to be difficult to stay entertained from far away all the way in the US. But it was an absolutely incredible presentation, and I can't highlight enough how practical and useful it is. So thank you again. Every time I watch your presentations, I look at your list and I'm like, oh, I do that now without thinking about it. And you actually outline every single point. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you so much to Africa Bio and Ahia for having me here. The Gene Vantage journey hasn't been short. I am 11 years post-PhD this year, and the first time I had the idea for Gene Vantage was during my PhD. So it took me a long time to develop kind of trust in my own scientific ability, first of all, and then also get to a point where you feel like you're ready to commercialize a product and you can actually function in the commercial sector. So I was in academia up until about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was working in a laboratory in Pretoria in South Africa. And I had been working on some DNA extraction kits for some crops. And the business had spent an enormous amount of money on installing these automated systems into the laboratory. And the deal was the South African company would install, I think we spent about 5 million on equipment. They had to install the machines, validate them, and do an actual DNA extraction and make sure everything was working perfectly. And then they could go home back to Germany. Long story short, they didn't manage to achieve that in about 2 years, and they eventually shipped their head of R&D out from Germany to South Africa to get the automated systems running. And during that time, we established that the products that I'd been making in the lab were outperforming the products from Germany. And it was only at that point where I really saw the value in the market, and that was basically the beginning of Gene Vantage. And I started saving money, and then I eventually quit my job. I managed to retain part-time roles so that at least I had some income. And then I started a business. It's now Gene Vantage turned 3 in June, so it hasn't been a short journey, but I absolutely love what I get to do. And I really value the impacts that I have on clients in a laboratory. And the reason for that is because I've always been the client. I've always been on the other side of the table in the laboratory. And so I have a very clear understanding of what my pain points were and what my frustrations were when it came to suppliers and the products I was buying. So every time I design a product for Gene Vantage, I always focus on my own experiences, which are typically resonated by the conversations I have with clients. So fast forward to today, we are based in Midrand in Johannesburg. We have a small team, but we are growing quite quickly. We now supply the criminal forensics biology laboratory in South Africa, and I have a personal passion for that because I know the backlog is over 200,000 samples, and that's impacting so many people's lives in South Africa when it comes to gender-based violence and a range of other related activities. So I really do value that I get to make a difference every single day. So that is the Gene Vantage story. What I want to do is cover a couple of key lessons that I've learned over the past few years. I'm going to do that by sharing my screen. If you give me a second. Okay, so Charlie's covered a very detailed list of ways to approach these things. And as much as that's good for pitching and getting investors on board, the exact same things apply to clients. And for me, I think while it's important to get investors on board, it's absolutely critical to be able to secure clients. And knowing exactly what your client wants is what counts. And that's where the sales comes in, and that's where the revenue is generated. So, sorry, I just want to move this out the way. So I just want to start with this. Being a good scientist is not enough. There are a lot of good scientists in the world that are great technically. They can make a really fantastic product. But being a biotech startup doesn't just require being a good scientist. You really need to be able to encompass a broad set of skills to be able to create a product, commercialize it, get it to market, secure clients, and retain clients over an extended time period. Sorry, my animation. Your market and the network that you have are invaluable. And I really feel that this was highlighted during the last trip that I had to Egypt with the HERE team. It makes such a big difference in terms of how you can access both finance, funding, and clients. So I really encourage you, even if you're a young student, go on LinkedIn, find people that are in your industry, find a mentor that can teach you where you need to go and where you want to be. It's been absolutely critical for me as a scientist turned entrepreneur. Thirdly, be selective with your partnerships. I think early on we encouraged to get venture capital funding so that you can get going and grow quite quickly. But it's very, very important who you partner with. Having a similar mindset and similar end goals in mind is really critical to that partnership being productive and working well in the long term. And then number 4, it's probably the most important one, be prepared to refuse to quit. I think you have to expect bad days. You have to expect days where you're going to lose clients, where the finances are tight in the business, where an investor has pulled out or whatever it might be. There are going to be tough days, and you just have to mentally prepare yourself for that, because if you're prepared, you will find a way to deal with it. And that's what counts. There's always going to be bad days, but how do you fix them? And that's, for me, that's the key to survival. Then these are a couple of key things that I really feel that I wish I knew about 4 years ago. So I just wanted to highlight these. I'm happy to put these links that I've listed in chats. If anyone wants them, we can cover that during the Q&A. But a lot of people in South Africa aren't familiar with this DTI R&D incentive that's in place in South Africa. That's specifically the Department of Trade and Industry, and that's the R&D incentive. And that essentially allows startup companies in South Africa to get 25% cash back on your turnover through this incentive. The whole incentive is online, so you can go visit that link and have a look at how it all works. I really encourage you to access it. I think when you early stage startup, you're pushing all your funds into R&D, and that 25% back could be a game changer between survival or collapsing. Uvu Bio is a biotech incubator that's based in Cape Town. So you can physically access a laboratory for quite a small fee and have access to a bench and some technical support and guidance. I think it's one of the best initiatives I've seen in a very long time, and it's the only one of its kind that I know of in South Africa. So I really encourage you to go have a look at them. You can find them on LinkedIn. They have some great YouTube videos that demonstrate the website. They also run a bunch of really, really useful training sessions that I highly encourage you to go and join and watch. I've been to a few of them and they were incredible. Then this is quite a new initiative. It's still called Startup Club ZA, and it's a collaboration between the London Africa Network and a couple of companies in South Africa. Go and find them on LinkedIn. There was just an event in Joburg. There's one in Cape Town in July. I can't remember the exact dates, but it's phenomenal. It's basically an incredible network of people all in the startup space. So you all have shared mindsets. We're all experiencing similar problems. So I really encourage you to go have a look at that. The guy that runs it does some really useful LinkedIn posts. I was actually just reading one before this webinar started today. Then I want to touch on some tools, and a lot of people have this idea that you need a lot of upfront capital to do very simplistic things right in the early phase. And some of those are like registering a business, registering a trademark. If you go online, some company is going to tell you it's going to cost you 5,000 Rand to register a business and another 8,000 Rand to register your trademark, which is often inaccessible when you're really early stage. But you can go and register a CIPC business yourself for 125 Rand. It takes a total of 3 days, and you can do it super quick. You need a copy of your ID and proof of physical address, and you're done. You can register a trademark also via the CIPC, which is also linked to the Biz portal, and that's a whopping 260 Rand. So as you can see, it's not going to cost several thousand Rand to get yourself off the ground. Then number 6, this is a personal obsession of mine lately, is AI. There really are some absolutely incredible tools for biotech startups and startups in general. There's ways you can create websites in 20 minutes. You can build pitch decks. You can write content for social media, whether that's, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can develop product management systems that can assist with like an e-commerce website. The world is your oyster. So I really encourage you to have a look at that. I've seen some incredible things around some startup companies actually training the AI system to become a personal assistant. And as an example, So he ran, I think it was a small plumbing company. So he had about 8 staff and he was trying to expand the business and he needed new staff to come on board. So he said to the AI, okay, I want you to become my personal assistant. Ask me all the questions that you need to become my personal assistant. And the AI came out with, how big is your team? What's your budget? What's your client base, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, and this person eventually used the AI to select a candidate for a job that he was interviewing, write the offer letter, draw a template contract from the internet. So the possibilities are endless. I really encourage you to have a look at that. That's all from my side. Thank you so much for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions. It's exciting to see a couple of clients actually on this session. I think I interact with a lot of them quite often, and they wonder what motivated me to get here. So I hope the story was interesting.
Yes, thank you very much, Genevieve, for sharing your experience and lessons you've learned along the way, and also for providing insight on the practical application to some of the insights or concepts that Dr. Charlie had shared in his presentation earlier, particularly around the areas of coming up with effective strategies and how to solve the highest priority problems and how that meets the market demands. So, Dr. Charlie, I see you nodding your head, and I think you have some reaction or questions or comments about her experience and presentation, and
I'm
happy to hear from you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought Genevieve's presentation was fantastic. I think the tools that you provided are exceptional, because one of the things people, okay, have an idea or something, but having tools to actually do things and moving forward is really valuable. So we really thought that was great and very important. We wanted to see if there's any questions out there for either Genevieve or myself.
Feel free to, ask any questions. But I think I have a question for you, Genevieve. I was wondering, can you share more insights or based on your experience on, the soft skills? You talked a lot about the soft skills, such as marketing techniques, establishing partnerships and networking opportunities that people need, especially startups at the very early stage. Do you want to share how you engaged in some of these practices and how that has helped you achieve the success you have so far?
That's a great question, Moses. I think it's often the hardest part of the startup journey. I think as a scientist, you train to be really good technically. You trained how to write proposals and, create a great product and be very technically correct. But being able to communicate with the client effectively and understanding their needs is really, really difficult. And so this is why when I see these presentations from Charlie and he's got 5 points of how to do it, it's extremely valuable. So I actually, I'm going to screen share on something. Charlie, I have your presentation. Share. I'm just going to, this one. So I know there's a lot of people on this webinar that are actually students, but I just want to highlight how useful this slide is. It's basically a little guideline for a salesperson when you go in and see a client. This is exactly what you need to be thinking.
Oh, critical.
Absolutely. And, when one of the things I remember from the training last year at BioAfrica was the key thing was scientists are told to get over it. So you literally care about your product more than anyone else, but no one cares about it the way you do. And you have to figure out exactly what the client wants. So I've learned, go into the clients, let them talk. The more they talk, the more information you get, the more likely to understand what they actually need. And once you understand what they need, you're more likely to be able to make a sale. And if you can't do that, you're really going to struggle. And I think with some junior sales reps, even this is difficult. Often you want to talk at the client and tell them all about your products and how great your company is and all the fantastic things it can do. But they don't care unless you're solving a problem and it's accessible to them and it really has impact. So this is your
fantastic.
Print this out, carry it with you. It's like your guideline.
Yeah. Which I'm going to talk a little bit next time, but the number one reason businesses fail, okay, is the lack of sales, actually. But lack of sales has to do with a number of different things. It could be that the product might not be the right product for the market. It could be that the marketing was not very effective in getting people to even know you existed. People don't buy it, they don't know you exist. Or maybe your sales process, you were too busy talking and not asking and getting them interested. So when you focus on sales, it's so critical. It's really great job. And I think making that point across to everybody is so important, really is.
Just want to add one other comment before we go back to the questions, Moses, is everything we've designed with Gene Vantage, we've had a client in mind. So we've never invested money in R&D on any product unless there was a client that was going to buy that product. We knew exactly how much they were willing to pay for the product. We knew exactly how many of those products they were going to buy. And it's one of the reasons we've been able to succeed is because we could plan our revenue stream and knew that we could cover our R&D costs. It's really a critical element. So I encourage you to do that.
Wow, awesome, Genevieve. Those are very good answers. And I think we have a few more questions. Dirk is asking, what are the highest priority problem your company is solving? If you want to answer that very quickly.
So there are other diagnostic suppliers in Africa. There's loads of them all over the world. But the problem is in Africa is accessibility, number one. Number two is cost, and three is training. So we make sure we develop products that are accessible to the African market. We 3D print devices that allow you to use that product without massive automated systems, which are common in Europe and the US, and Africa doesn't have access to those. And then we always provide extensive technical support, whether that's on site. We typically spend a couple of days on site with all our clients, but then after that, we often provide remote support, and that's often via WhatsApp. And the reason for doing that is because everyone has a cell phone, and generally everyone has WhatsApp. Not everyone in Africa has access to a laptop or a webcam or whatever it might be. So I've provided technical support at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning during COVID to a laboratory that the PCR failed during the night, and now they've got 300 people waiting to get on a plane, and no one can get on a plane because the PCR failed. So yeah, those are our key things.
That's great.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. Richard, very quickly, I think we're going to be wrapping up, but to answer your question, I think the first series in this Perfecting the Pitch series aims to or provided a lot of information about how to craft a successful pitch, and I think you can have access to that on YouTube. We're going to send an email as with that regards, and you can see the presentation from May 31st and also learn as much as you can from what we have today, and that would help to I think give you an idea of how to address the public health concern you're interested in. And we're also going to share our email, and you can feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions. Genevieve, can you stop sharing so I can share my screen? Okay, thank you. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So yes, thank you very much, Dr. Genevieve and Charlie, once again for such an engaging presentation and for sharing your experience with the attendees today. So as a quick reminder for our attendees today, we just wanted to let you know that AHEA is very invested in doing so many training programs across the year that's geared towards improving health innovation in Africa and equipping innovators in the region to better prepare themselves to successfully pitch their ideas to potential investors. And in this series, we still have one more part, which is coming up in 2 weeks. And the title of that series is called Creating Your Business Strategy. We're going to be sharing the link for this session in the chat box, and we have some interesting speakers lined up already for this event. So please feel free to register, and we look forward to having you join us in 2 weeks. Also, please take note that the BioAfrica Convention is coming up very quickly, actually in the first week of September in Durban, South Africa. And we want to particularly highlight that there will be a startup stadium where you can apply to pitch your idea And it's a very great opportunity to, get your idea out there and also stand the chance of winning some very important prize that can help support your entrepreneurial journey and also connect you to very good stakeholders in the health innovation space in Africa. So feel free to write us an email on ahiaemory@gmail.com if you have any further questions about the Perfecting the Pitch series or any questions specific to the work we do as Ahia. Genevieve is also happy to take any of your questions, and you can see our email on the screen. And as I mentioned earlier, the BioAfrica Convention is coming up in a few weeks, and this is an excellent opportunity for you to pitch your startup idea to a host of people who are heavily invested in the space, and hopefully you can use this as an opportunity to leverage existing partnerships that we have to advance your innovation. So in conclusion, thank you very much to our esteemed speakers for sharing your wealth of experience with us today. And we are very grateful for this session, and we look forward to having you join us again in 2 weeks for the last session of the Perfecting the Pitch series. Feel free to register, and I think we have the email addresses, the links in the chat box. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Great job.
Enjoy.
All right, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.